Why was she still shaking when the air smelled of nothing but motor oil and pine? Captain Callie Mercer stood beneath the raised hood of a 1998 Ford pickup, fingers tracing the worn serpentine belt with the same quiet precision that had once guided a rifle's trigger. The October air in Pinehaven carried the damp sweetness of the mountains, slipping through the open bay doors of Mercer's automotive. Out there, the sun spilled across the peaks. In here, everything smelled of grease, steel, and old ghosts. "Dad," parts delivery guy says, "we're short 3 spark plugs on the Morrison order." Her daughter's voice came from the front office, young, quick, clear. 19 now, smart enough to ask questions Callie didn't always want to answer. "Check the bin by the tire rack," Callie called back, wiping her hands on a rag that had given up pretending to be clean. "Shane moved inventory around yesterday." Naomi appeared in the doorway, dark hair in a loose ponytail, wearing a flannel shirt that had probably been her mother before her. She leaned against the frame, studying her quietly. "Found them," Naomi said. "Also, Principal Daniels called. They're doing that Veterans Day thing on Saturday. He wants you to be part of it." Callie's hands stilled for only a breath before resuming the slow, mechanical rhythm of tightening a clamp. "I'm not much for ceremonies." "That's what I told him," Naomi said, but she didn't leave. "He said the town's trying to recognize local veterans, said there's some big deal Marine general coming. Ashford, I think." The name landed like a dull thud in Callie's chest. General Douglas Ashford. A name she hadn't spoken aloud in 12 years. She kept her face neutral. "That right?" Naomi nodded. "He's got some fancy ranch outside town. Never comes around. Guess the mayor talked him into showing up this year." Callie just said, "Guess so," and went back to her work. But her hands, steady a moment ago, felt heavier now. Outside, a battered Chevy sedan groaned into the lot. Shane Murphy climbed out, tall, sandy-haired, his shoulders slumped under invisible weight. 29. Former Army mechanic. One of the few who could look Callie in the eye and recognize what silence really meant. "Transmission slipping again," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I swear I didn't push it." Callie glanced under the hood. "You've been driving it hard." "Bad week," he muttered. "Didn't elaborate, didn't need to." She nodded. "Leave it. I'll take a look this afternoon. You can use the loaner." Naomi's voice floated from the office. "Doc Fisher called earlier," she said. "Asked if you're coming to the group meeting tonight." Callie didn't look up. "Probably not." "Thought so," Naomi replied softly. "He said to tell you pretending fine is not the same as being fine." A faint smirk tugged at Callie's mouth. "Doc talks too much." "So do you," Naomi shot back, and disappeared into the office again. Shane chuckled. "She's got your fire." "She's got her mother's heart," Callie said quietly. By afternoon, the shop settled into its usual rhythm. The hum of tools, the radio whispering old country songs, the metallic clink of wrenches against bolts. The kind of music that filled silence but didn't erase it. When Callie finally stepped outside, the mountain wind carried faint echoes of laughter from the diner across the street. She wiped her hands and glanced toward the hazy outline of the Veterans Memorial Park down the road, where crews were setting up folding chairs and banners. Red, white, and blue fluttering against the pale sky. A life ago, she might have felt pride. Now it just felt distant. The next morning dawned cold and gray. Callie drove up the hill to Meadowbrook Assisted Living, a paper bag of breakfast biscuits on the passenger seat. Inside, her father sat by a window, staring at the mountains that framed the town. "Hey, Dad," she said gently, "brought you something from the Ridge Diner." Walter Mercer turned, his gaze taking a moment to focus. His once broad shoulders stooped slightly now, his hands restless in his lap. "Callie," he said finally, smiling, "you came. Wouldn't miss it." They ate in companionable silence for a while, the sound of the television murmuring from the corner. Old war footage, Korea, black and white, Her father used to tell those stories like sermons. Now he forgot them halfway through. "They're having some ceremony this weekend," he said suddenly. "Veterans Day, I think you should go." "I remember fine without ceremonies." Walter turned to her with a spark of clarity that pierced the fog. "You carry it different than I did," he said quietly. "I talked about Korea too much. You don't talk at all. That's not the same as healing, Callie." The words landed heavier than he knew. She smiled faintly, squeezed his shoulder, and said nothing. That evening the shop was quiet. Naomi had gone to the library for a journalism project. Shane had taken the loner home. Callie sat alone on the workbench, watching the rain bead across the concrete. When the phone rang, she nearly ignored it. Then she saw the caller ID, Mayor Lindstrom. "Callie," came the warm, political tone. "We'd love to have you on stage Saturday. Representation matters, especially for the younger veterans and for the girls in the crowd." "I appreciate it," Callie said carefully, "but I'd rather just attend." The mayor sighed. "I understand, but General Ashford personally asked for a list of veterans from Afghanistan. Your name came up." Callie froze. "My name?" "Yes, from the county records. He said he wanted to shake hands with as many of his fellow veterans as possible." She could almost hear the mayor's smile through the phone. But Callie's pulse had already changed tempo. "I'll think about it," she said, and hung up before the silence grew too long. The sound of the rain returned. So did a faint ringing in her ears, something that wasn't really there, something from another lifetime. Rotor blades, static, voices shouting over gunfire. Kunar Province. Operation Nightshade. She pressed her palms against the workbench, knuckles white. 12 years of silence cracked just slightly. Naomi came home late, cheeks flushed from the cold laptop bag slung over her shoulder. "Miss Chu says hi," she said, dropping onto the couch. "She used to be a war correspondent, you know, covered special operations units. She says the hardest stories to tell are the ones nobody's allowed to talk about." Callie stiffened. "That's so." "Yeah, and Naomi hesitated, opening her laptop. "I've been reading about General Ashford. He's got all these medals and books written about him, but there's a weird 4-month gap in his record. 2013. Everything's redacted." Callie's heart tripped, but her voice stayed calm. "Most special operations are classified, Naomi. That's normal." Naomi turned the screen toward her. "This isn't normal. There was a congressional inquiry that got shut down in 2014. Families of soldiers who died in Afghanistan, people who said they never got answers. Ms. Chu said I could try a Freedom of Information request." Callie's throat went dry. "You did that?" Naomi nodded. "I wanted to know why you looked like you'd seen a ghost when I mentioned Ashford." The irony almost made her laugh. Ghost Recon. A ghost was exactly what she'd become. "You're treading in dangerous water, Naomi," she said softly. "Dangerous because of him," Naomi pressed, "or because of you?" Callie didn't answer. That was an answer in itself. When the shop finally darkened that night, Callie climbed the stairs to her small apartment above it. The walls were lined with quiet pieces of her life. A photo of Sarah, Naomi's mother, standing in the sunlight outside an airfield. A folded flag in a shadow box. A single medal tucked inside a drawer. She opened the closet, reached for the locked steel box on the highest shelf, and set it down on the floor. Inside were the things she swore she'd never touch again. A faded patch. A folded map of Kunar Province. And the dog tag of Aaron Briggs, Ghost 2. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched it. 12 years. 12 years since that day, since the radio went dead and Ashford's order came through, cold and absolute. Abort mission. Leave them. She had refused. And people died anyway. The price of disobedience had been silence. The kind that kills slower than bullets. Sleep came late and left early. Before dawn, Callie stood at the kitchen sink, watching the first gray light spill across the mountains. She hadn't dreamed, not exactly, just relived. The heat, the static, the screaming. Sometimes memory wasn't a flashback. It was a room you never left. At the shop, Shane was already there, coffee steaming in his hands. "Couldn't sleep," he said simply. "Yeah," she murmured, "me neither." He hesitated. "You gonna go to that veterans thing?" "Maybe." "You should," he said quietly. "Doc says healing happens when you stop hiding." Callie smiled faintly. "Doc says a lot of things." "Yeah, but he's right." She looked at him, seeing in his weary eyes the same ghosts that haunted her own. Maybe Doc was right. Maybe it was time to stop running. But deep down, she knew. Stopping meant confronting the one man she'd promised herself never to face again. And in 3 days, General Douglas Ashford would be standing less than 50 feet away. That night, rain swept the town again. The shop lights glowed dimly through the mist. Callie sat alone, listening to it. Her father's words echoed softly through memory. "You carry it different than I did. That's not the same as healing." She looked down at her hands, at the faint scars across her knuckles, marks from another life, another battlefield, and whispered to the empty room. "I know, Dad, but some things don't heal, they just stop bleeding." Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. Inside, the past began to stir. The storm had passed by morning, but the sky still looked bruised. At Mercer's Automotive, rainwater dripped from the bay doors, collecting in shallow puddles that reflected the gray light of dawn. Callie arrived before sunrise, coffee in hand, jacket collar turned up against the chill. The shop smelled of wet concrete and oil, familiar, grounding, almost safe. Shane was already there, sleeves rolled up, the Mustang restoration project pulled into the main bay. He didn't say good morning, just handed her a fresh cup from the small breakroom pot. That was their language, quiet efficiency. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Didn't even try," he said, eyes on the engine. "Doc Fisher called, said he's picking me up for group tonight. Guess that means I'm going whether I want to or not." "Doc's persistent." "Yeah, he also said you should come." Callie set the coffee down carefully. "I've got the Morrison transmission to finish." "Sure you do." Shane's voice was mild, but the glance he gave her said he saw through it. "You can keep wrenching, or you can talk to people who understand why you don't sleep. Your call." She didn't answer, just lifted the hood of another vehicle and started checking the oil line. Avoidance as survival. It had worked for 12 years. Around 9, Naomi came in, her raincoat dripping onto the floor, messenger bag slung across her shoulder. "Route 7's half flooded," she said. "School's delayed, so I figured I'd help here." "You're supposed to be in class," Callie murmured. "Ms. Chu said I should expand my veteran interview project," Naomi said casually, setting her bag down. "She wants me to talk to people who support veterans too, spouses, kids, employers." Shane grinned faintly. "You interviewing your mom about employing me?" Naomi smirked. "Maybe." Callie shook her head. "She's not your mom." Naomi leaned on the counter, her expression softening. "You raised me alone for 17 years. You earned the title." That stopped Callie's breath for half a second. She masked it by checking her watch. "Phones are quiet. You can answer them if they ring." "Copy that, Captain," Naomi teased lightly, but the word captain lingered in the air. Too close, too knowing. The shop phone did ring, just before noon. Naomi answered with her practiced politeness. "Mercer's Automotive, how can I help you?" "Yes, she's here, just a moment." She covered the receiver, eyes a little wider than usual. "Mayor Lindstrom." Callie hesitated, then took the phone. "Morning, Mayor." "Callie, thank you for taking my call," came the cheerful voice. "I'll get straight to it. We've got a big opportunity with General Ashford attending. Regional news coverage, local press, perfect exposure for Pine Haven's veterans. I'd like to have you on stage." I appreciate the offer, Callie said slowly, but I'm not comfortable with that level of attention. The mayor's voice softened. People respect you, Callie. You've built a good life here. It's a powerful message for others, especially young women thinking about service. My service was a long time ago. General Ashford specifically asked about veterans from Afghanistan, the mayor continued. Your name came up. The silence stretched. Callie could hear her own heartbeat. I'm sorry, she said at last. I can't. Well, the mayor sighed. If you change your mind, we'd be honored. He arrives tomorrow. When Callie hung up, Naomi and Shane were both watching her. She forced a neutral smile. Mayor wants me on stage, she said lightly. I said no. Naomi frowned. General Ashford asked about you. That's what she said. That's weird, Shane murmured. Generals don't usually do small-town background checks. Callie's jaw tightened. He probably just wants talking points. But the air in the shop had shifted, as if even the fluorescent lights knew something was wrong. That evening, Naomi didn't come straight home from the library. Callie pretended not to notice. She sat at the kitchen table, the casserole Vera had dropped off untouched. The clock ticked loud enough to fill the silence. When Naomi finally came in, she was flushed with that dangerous mix of adrenaline and curiosity. So, she said carefully, you want to tell me what ghost recon is? Callie froze, the fork in her hand didn't move. Where'd you hear that? You said you didn't like questions, Naomi said, so I asked the internet. The name shows up in old forums. Shadow Unit, no record, Afghanistan, 2013, everything redacted. Stop, Callie said, voice low. Why, you're part of it, aren't you? Callie looked at her daughter across the small kitchen, the same green eyes Sarah used to have, bright with stubbornness. You don't understand what you're digging into. Then make me understand. Not everything needs to be printed in your school paper, Callie snapped, sharper than she intended. You're treading into things that can get people hurt. Naomi flinched but held her ground. You're scared of him, aren't you, that general? I'm not scared. A lie that cracked on the edges. I just know what men like him can do. She stood, pushed back from the table, and walked down the hall before Naomi could see the tremor in her hands. Later she found herself outside, standing under the carport where the night smelled of rain and metal. The stars above Pinehaven were faint through the clouds, but she stared up anyway as if she could see beyond them, to the sand-colored mountains of Cunnar. The memory was always waiting. A flash, a voice over comms. Abort mission. The order she'd refused. She'd thought silence was safety, but silence, she realized, had only made her easier to find. By morning the clouds had thinned, but the world felt heavier. Naomi barely spoke over breakfast. Her hurt was quiet but visible, the way she stirred her cereal without eating it. Callie wanted to say something, apologize, but words were dangerous things for people who'd spent their lives keeping secrets. When the truck door shut behind Naomi, the silence that followed was a relief, then a punishment. She drove to the library after work. Vera Kowalski looked up from her desk, glasses perched on the end of her nose. You're here for Naomi. Yes, she around. In the archives, I asked her to help with some records. Vera studied Callie a moment longer. She's a smart girl, you should be proud. I am, Callie said softly, just worried. About what? Her curiosity. She's pulling on strings that shouldn't be pulled. Vera hesitated. She mentioned your service, said she thought you might know something about General Ashford. Callie looked at her. You knew Sarah, you know what losing her did to me. I built this quiet life for Naomi. I can't have Ashford tearing it apart. Then tell her the truth, Vera said gently. If you don't, she'll find it herself. She's not ready. Vera's expression softened, but her words didn't. You raised her to be brave, Callie. Brave people don't stay ignorant forever. That evening, Pastor Wright's church smelled of coffee and wet coats. The veteran support group met in the fellowship hall, a circle of chairs and warm lamplight. Callie hadn't been in months. Doc Fisher spotted her at the door and smiled, lines deepening around his eyes. "Well, I'll be damned. Captain Mercer in the flesh." "Don't start, Doc," she said, but there was a flicker of warmth in her voice. They sat, a dozen veterans, men and women who carried their own versions of ghosts. The air held that fragile respect between people who knew pain could be private and still shared. Doc began, "Anyone want to start tonight?" Rita Hayes, the young Marine corporal, talked about her daughter's nightmares. Leon Tucker, an old Vietnam vet, shared a memory that still woke him 50 years later. Then Shane spoke, voice steady but eyes distant, about losing his marriage and how the sound of engines was the only thing that calmed him. When it came to Callie, silence held the room. "My daughter been researching," she said finally. "She stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to find." Doc tilted his head. "Something about your service." "Something about a man I used to answer to." Her voice was steady now, low. "General Douglas Ashford." That name changed the air. Doc set his coffee down. "You know him?" "I did a lifetime ago." She hesitated, the words sharp-edged in her mouth. 12 years ago, my team was ordered to abandon civilians during a raid. I refused." Nobody moved. The hum of the fluorescent light was the only sound. "2 of my people died," she continued. "We saved the civilians. The report said it was an unauthorized mission. Ashford signed it." Doc's jaw clenched. "You took the fall." "They erased us. Ghost Recon never existed." The circle sat heavy in silence. Then Rita spoke quietly. "You did the right thing." "Maybe," Callie said, "but the right thing still costs every day." Doc leaned forward. "So what are you going to do when he shows up here?" "I don't know," she said. "Maybe nothing, maybe everything." After the meeting, Shane caught up with her in the parking lot. "You're not going to be able to stay invisible after Saturday." "I was never invisible," she said, "just pretending." "Then maybe it's time to stop pretending." Callie looked at the mountains in the distance, the peaks silver under moonlight. "The last time I stopped pretending, people died." Shane didn't answer. Some truths had no replies. At home, Naomi was asleep, laptop open beside her on the couch. The screen showed an unfinished article draft titled "The Soldiers Who Never Came Home." Callie stood there for a long time, watching her daughter's slow breathing, the innocence that war stories always forget to mention. She reached out and gently closed the laptop. Then whispered to the quiet room, "Don't look for ghosts, kid. Sometimes they find you first." Sleep came late again, fractured by the sound of rotor blades that weren't really there. When she woke, the morning light had a strange clarity, as if the world itself was holding its breath. 2 days until Veterans Day. And somewhere out there, a 4-star general was already on his way to Pinehaven. The sun came back with a vengeance the day before the ceremony. Blue skis, gold leaves. Pinehaven looked clean, peaceful, the kind of town that pretended nothing bad ever happened. Callie knew better. At the shop, the radio played soft country music that couldn't drown out her thoughts. Every metallic clang echoed too loudly. Every shadow seemed to linger longer than it should. She checked the bolts on a transmission for the 3rd time, not because it needed it, but because it kept her hands busy. "Coffee's fresh," Shane said from the break room doorway. "You look like you could use it." She nodded, wiping her hands on a rag. "Thanks." He hesitated. "You hear from the mayor again?" "Yeah, she left a message. Something about rehearsal for tomorrow." "And I deleted it." Shane exhaled slowly. "Doc says that's avoidance." "Doc says a lot of things." He smiled faintly. "You ever think maybe he's right?" She gave him a look. "You ever think maybe I like being wrong?" He laughed quietly, then went back to work. The easy silence that followed felt fragile like glass stretched too thin. Naomi showed up mid-morning, laptop bag across her shoulder, eyes bright with determination. Trouble always came with that look. "Don't say it," Callie muttered without looking up. "Whatever it is, don't." "I just want to show you something," Naomi said carefully, pulling out her laptop. "I'm being careful. Ms. Chu been helping me check sources." "Naomi, hear me out, please." Callie sighed. "Fine, show me." Naomi turned the screen. This is a 2013 congressional record. There was an inquiry about a mission called Operation Nightshade, classified, redacted. But look here, she zoomed in on a faint name reference, General Douglas Ashford, commanding officer. Report mentions multiple casualties under unclear circumstances, and it matches the timeline of the missing 4 months in his record. Callie stared at the page. Naomi's voice softened. "There's more. Families of soldiers who died filed for information. They were denied. I called one of them Mildred Jansen. Her son died in Afghanistan. She said she was told he disobeyed orders, but she doesn't believe it." Callie closed the laptop gently. "You need to stop." "Why? If something wrong happened, don't people deserve the truth?" "Truth gets people hurt, Naomi." "Are you saying you know what happened?" Callie looked at her for a long time, 1,000 unspoken things in that silence. "I'm saying the people involved paid for it, some with their lives, some with what was left after." Naomi didn't blink. "You mean you?" Callie turned away. "Go home, Naomi." But the girl didn't move. "You always tell me to be brave, to ask questions, but you shut down the moment I do. Who are you protecting?" Callie's jaw clenched. "You." By afternoon, the air in Pinehaven had changed. The town was setting up for the Veterans Day ceremony. Folding chairs lined the park. The gazebo was dressed in flags and bunting. Local news trucks parked near the square. And among the bustle, 2 black SUVs rolled through town quietly, tinted windows, official plates. The kind of detail no one noticed unless they were trained to. Callie noticed. She was outside the shop, tightening the lug nuts on a Ford when they passed. No insignia, no press markings, just that unmistakable government posture, a lead vehicle, a follow car, eyes hidden behind glass. She watched until they disappeared down Main Street, her pulse quickening in that old, familiar rhythm, the one her body remembered even when her mind refused to. She wiped her hands on the rag, voice steady only because it had to be. "Shane." He turned. "Yeah. Lock up early today, and check the cameras tonight." He frowned. "You think we're being watched?" "I think we've been found." At the diner that evening, the crowd was buzzing. The mayor's announcement had hit the local news. 4-star Marine General Douglas Ashford to attend Pinehaven Veterans Ceremony. Denise Murray, the owner, waved Callie over. "You gonna be there tomorrow, hun?" "Just watching," Callie said. "Well, tell that general of yours to try the biscuits," Denise laughed. "Maybe he'll remember us little folks." Callie forced a smile. The sound of laughter around her felt wrong, like someone whistling at a funeral. From the counter, she caught a reflection in the diner's front glass. A man sitting alone in a parked car across the street. Not eating, not on his phone, just waiting. When she blinked, he started the engine and drove off. She left her food half-eaten and went home. That night, Naomi wasn't there. The living room lights were off, her jacket missing, her laptop gone. Callie called her phone, no answer. She called the library. Vera picked up on the 3rd ring. "Tell me she's there," Callie said. "She is," Vera said quickly. "I asked her to help me sort some records. She's fine." "You sure?" "She's safe, Callie, but she's been asking about that general, about Afghanistan." Callie pressed a hand to her forehead. "I need you to do me a favor. Tomorrow, keep her with you during the ceremony. Don't let her near that park." That going to be easy? No, Callie admitted, but do it anyway. She's going to know something's wrong. I know, Callie said softly. Just keep her safe. The night stretched on endlessly. Callie sat on her porch with the lights off, watching the town through the dark. She could feel it, the invisible movement of gears turning somewhere far above her. Government gears, military gears, the kind that crushed people without even noticing. 12 years of silence, and it had taken one curious teenager to wake it all. She whispered into the night, "You should have left it buried, Ashford." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure if she was talking to him or herself. The next morning, Chief Deputy Antonio Silva showed up at the shop. Army vet, old friend, one of the few who didn't look at her with pity or fear. He leaned against the doorframe holding 2 coffees. "You look like hell." "Thanks," she muttered, taking one. "I heard about the mayor's invite. You turning it down?" "Already did." "Good," he sipped. "You know he asked specifically for Afghanistan vets, right? That's unusual." Callie looked at him. "You checked?" "I did, made some calls to people I still know. The Department of Defense has an open internal investigation. Rumors say it's about falsified after-action reports from 2013. Her stomach dropped. "You're sure?" Antonio nodded. "You ring any bells with that year?" She didn't answer. "I'm not going to press," he said gently. "But if that general's dirty, someone up top feeling the heat, and if he knows you're connected, he might be coming to make sure your version never gets heard." He straightened, serious now. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Callie, you're not alone. You got friends here, me, Shane, Doc. Hell, half this town owes you free oil changes for life." She smiled faintly. "Appreciate that, Tony." "Good," he finished his coffee. "Because I already told the sheriff's office to keep extra eyes on the park tomorrow. Call it a gut feeling." When he left, the quiet returned, but it felt different now. Not peace, the kind of quiet before an explosion. That evening, Naomi came home early, cautious like someone who knew she'd pushed too far. "Vera said you stopped by," she said. "I did," Callie replied. "You okay?" Naomi nodded. "Yeah, she told me you asked her to keep me away from the ceremony tomorrow. Why?" "Because it's not safe." "It's a Veterans Day ceremony, Mom." "Sometimes ceremonies are just fronts," Callie said. "Sometimes they're stages." "For what?" Callie looked out the window. "For truth or for lies depends who's talking." Naomi studied her mother for a long moment. Then quietly, "What happened in Afghanistan?" Callie met her eyes and this time didn't deflect. "Everything and nothing. We were ordered to abandon civilians. We refused. 2 of mine died because command left us stranded. The man in charge was Douglas Ashford." Naomi's voice barely rose above a whisper. "He's the one you're afraid of." "I'm not afraid," Callie said. "I'm just done fighting ghosts." "Then why do you still keep their dog tags?" "That hit like shrapnel." Callie's breath faltered, but she didn't look away. "Because the dead deserve to be remembered right." Naomi swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "Then maybe that's what tomorrow's about." Callie didn't sleep. She sat by the window, metal in one hand, coffee in the other, as dawn crept over the mountains. Veterans Memorial Park gleamed in the distance, chairs lined up like silent witnesses. Somewhere beyond them truth waited, ugly, buried, inevitable. And somewhere between fear and resolve, she made her choice. She was going, not to honor Ashford, not to forgive him, but to stop pretending. The morning of Veterans Day arrived with sunlight so sharp it almost felt cruel. People filled the park, laughing, taking photos, waving flags. The world looked bright, clean, deceptive. Callie stood in the back of the crowd, leather jacket zipped, hands in her pockets. Shane was beside her, posture tense. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," she said, "but it's time." He nodded. "Then I've got your back." Across the park, she saw the black SUVs arrive. Doors opened. General Douglas Ashford stepped out, silver hair gleaming, smile rehearsed, medals flashing like armor. And for the first time in 12 years, Callie Mercer saw the man who'd turned ghosts into silence. The crowd applauded, the mayor greeted him. And Callie's heartbeat fell into the rhythm of memory, the one that began the day everything went wrong. The band started playing before the crowd even settled. A slow, proud march under a sky so blue, it almost mocked the ghost standing among them. Callie stood near the back, eyes half hidden beneath her cap. Naomi and Vera were off to the side by the gazebo, handing out programs. Shane lingered behind her, scanning the crowd like he was still on patrol. Flags rippled in the mountain breeze. Children waved miniature versions, smiling for photos. Callie couldn't look at them, not when she knew what those flags sometimes hid. On the stage, Mayor Lindstrom adjusted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, citizens of Pinehaven, thank you for joining us on this special day. It's an honor to welcome our veterans, our heroes, and a very special guest." The applause built, polite and curious, before the mayor's voice rose again. "Please welcome Marine General Douglas Ashford." The sound that followed was thunderous. Clapping hands, cheering voices, a sea of smiles. And through that sound came the slow, deliberate footsteps of a man who'd built a career on silence and charm. General Ashford climbed the steps in full dress uniform, medals gleaming, face carved from the same cold stone as command itself. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no for very long. When he reached the podium, he looked over the crowd with practiced warmth. But when his gaze passed over Callie, it lingered. Only for a second. Just long enough. "Thank you, Mayor Lindstrom," he began, voice smooth and deep. "And thank you, Pinehaven, for reminding all of us what service truly means. Not politics, not glory, just sacrifice." He paused as if he owned the silence between words. "You know, I served with some incredible men and women overseas. Brave, selfless people who gave more than they ever got back. We lost good souls out there, some whose stories the world will never know." Callie's chest tightened. Ashford smiled faintly. "But that's why we gather, to honor the ones who carried the flag forward, no matter what it cost." No matter what it cost. The words hit like a blade sliding between old scars. Shane leaned closer. "You okay?" "Yeah," she said quietly, "just listening." Ashford's voice rolled on. "We heal by remembering, by letting go of the past and standing together again as brothers and sisters in arms." A polite cheer followed. Cameras flashed. The mayor nodded approvingly. Callie looked down at her boots, worn, scuffed, honest. The opposite of everything happening on that stage. Letting go of the past. That was easy for the man who'd rewritten it. The mayor returned to the microphone. "Thank you, General. Now, before we close, I'd like to recognize a few of Pinehaven's own veterans." Callie's stomach dropped when she heard her name. Captain Callie Mercer, U.S. Army, Afghanistan, 2013. Heads turned, applause broke out again. Naomi's eyes found hers from across the crowd, proud, uncertain, afraid. Ashford's expression didn't change, not visibly. But something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, surprise, then calculation. The mayor gestured. "Captain Mercer, would you join us on stage?" Callie froze. For a heartbeat, the world went soundless. Then she felt Shane's quiet hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to," he murmured. "Nobody would blame you." She took a slow breath. "I'm tired of hiding." And before reason could stop her, she stepped forward. The applause followed her like a wave as she walked up the small wooden steps. Boots on old boards, the creak of memory beneath every footfall. Ashford extended a hand, his smile tight. "Captain Mercer, an honor." She stared at that hand for a long moment before taking it. His grip was firm, cold. For just an instant, she saw it, the flicker of unease behind his perfect posture. "Likewise, sir," she said evenly. The mayor gestured for a photo. The camera clicked. Flash, light, pretend smiles. And then, just as the mayor turned to thank the crowd, Ashford leaned close, voice low enough only she could hear. "I thought you were dead." Callie didn't blink. "You almost made sure of that." He smiled thinly. "Careful, Captain. Some ghosts are better left buried." She held his gaze. Some generals forget who buried them. He stepped back before anyone noticed, expression smooth again. "We're grateful for your service, Captain Mercer, truly." The crowd clapped again, blind, cheerful, unaware they were applauding two people standing in a minefield. When the ceremony ended, people swarmed the stage for handshakes and selfies. Ashford moved through them easily, shaking hands, laughing, every motion rehearsed. Callie slipped away toward the trees at the edge of the park, lungs burning for air. Naomi caught up halfway down the path. "Mom, what was that? You didn't tell me you were going up there." "I didn't plan to." "Then why did you?" Callie stopped, facing her, "Because he needed to see I'm still standing." Naomi looked back toward the stage. He looked scared. "Good," Callie said softly. "He should be." Later that afternoon, the town buzzed with post-ceremony talk. Ashford had gone to the mayor's reception at the community hall. Reporters crowded around, getting quotes and photos. The story would run by evening. Marine General honors Pinehaven veterans. But in the background of one of those photos, if anyone looked closely, stood Callie Mercer. Not smiling, just watching. Shane found her by the service road behind the diner. "You okay?" "Define okay." "You made your point." "Not yet," she said. "He knows I'm alive, that's only half the point." He studied her. "You're thinking about confronting him." "I'm thinking about closure." "Same thing if you're lucky," he said quietly. "Suicide if you're not." She smirked. "You always this optimistic." "Only around you." The banter faded, replaced by the low hum of the town's quiet evening. Somewhere down Main Street she heard laughter, music, life going on. "You ever wonder," she said softly, "if maybe people like us aren't meant to have peace? Maybe it's something we guard for everyone else." Shane shook his head. "Peace isn't something you guard, it's something you earn." She looked toward the glowing windows of the town hall. "Then I guess I've got work to do." Inside the hall, Ashford was alone for a moment, checking his reflection in the mirror above the sink. The applause had faded, the cameras gone. The practiced smile finally slipped. He looked older now, tired, haunted. When the door creaked open, he glanced up. Callie stood there, hands in her jacket pockets. "Captain Mercer," he said evenly, "didn't expect an encore." "I'm not here for applause," she said. "I want to know why you asked for me." He leaned against the counter, calm as ever. "You think I remembered every soldier under my command. You're flattering yourself." "Then you won't mind if I remind you," she said, stepping closer. "Kunar Province, March 12, 2013, Operation Nightshade, civilians pinned in a compound. Command ordered retreat. You ordered retreat." His jaw tightened. "You disobeyed." "I saved lives." "You cost me men." "You cost us truth." He turned away, voice hardening. "That's enough, Captain." "No, sir, it is." She took another step. "You buried that report. You told Congress my team acted without authorization. You erased us to protect your promotion." Ashford's silence said more than denial ever could. Callie's voice softened, dangerously calm. "Two of my team died that day because we waited for your evac that never came. They believed in the chain of command. In you." Ashford's eyes flickered. "You don't know what you're talking about. You weren't in the room when those decisions were made." "No," she said. "I was on the ground when they were paid for." For a moment, the air between them felt electric. Two soldiers, two ghosts. One truth neither one had spoken aloud. Ashford broke the silence first. You walk out that door and keep quiet, Captain, and we both stay free. You make noise and old wounds open in places that still bleed red, white, and blue. Think about your daughter. Callie's eyes narrowed. I already am. Then she turned and left. Outside, the night had deepened. The sound of laughter drifted from the hall, polite, hollow, meaningless. Callie walked past it, toward the darker streets where the stars barely reached. Shane caught up halfway down the block. You went in there, didn't you? She nodded. And he's still lying. Yeah, Shane said quietly. They always are. She looked at the quiet houses lining the street, porches with flags, families eating dinner, kids playing by lamplight. The kind of peace her team had died to protect. Maybe he's right, she whispered. Maybe silence is safer. Shane shook his head. Safe isn't the same as right. She stared ahead, expression unreadable. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring, soft, hollow, counting down the hours until everything changed. When she got home, Naomi was waiting on the porch, eyes red but steady. You want to see him, she said. Callie nodded. Did he admit it? No, but he didn't deny it either. Naomi swallowed. Then what happens now? Callie looked at her daughter, the only piece of her life untouched by war, and said quietly, Now, we decide what truth is worth. The wind picked up through the pines, carrying the last echoes of the day. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the past still waited patient, unburied. And in the faint reflection of her front door glass, Callie saw her own eyes for the first time in years. Tired, haunted, but alive. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply stands up. The sound of tires on gravel woke her before dawn. Callie sat up instantly, heart thudding against the silence. She hadn't been dreaming, she didn't dream anymore, but the body never forgot what danger sounded like. She reached for the pistol locked in the bedside drawer, then stopped herself. Not yet, not until she was sure. Through the window, headlights swept across the wall, then vanished. A car paused at the end of the drive, too long. Then it turned away, slow, deliberate, and disappeared down the road. Callie stayed sitting in the dark long after it was gone. By morning, she was at the shop early. Coffee, no breakfast, the smell of oil and dust filling the air like armor. Shane came in half an hour later, holding 2 donuts in a paper bag. You look like you fought the night, he said. Night started it. He studied her face. Something happened. She hesitated. Car came up the road at 4 a.m., sat there, watching. You get a plate. No. You think it was Ashford. Callie tightened the wrench in her hand. I think ghosts don't like being reminded they exist. He nodded slowly. You want me to stay tonight? She glanced at him, grateful but unwilling to say it. We'll see. Naomi came by after school, hair windblown, face set with that mix of fear and determination that always made Callie nervous. Ms. Chu told me to interview someone with first-hand combat experience, she said casually. So, you. Not a good idea. Naomi's smile didn't fade. Too late, I already have questions. Naomi. Just let me listen, she interrupted softly. You don't have to talk about the mission, just tell me what it felt like being there. Callie paused, her eyes distant. Like breathing through fire, like every sound was a decision, like hope was something you borrowed, knowing you'd have to pay it back. Naomi swallowed. Did you ever stop being scared? You never stop, Callie said. You just learn how to move anyway. They stood in silence. Then Naomi said, if what you did saved lives, why would anyone try to hide it? Because truth doesn't always fit the report, Callie murmured, and some men build their careers on clean lies. Then we tell the truth. Callie looked at her, young, fearless, idealistic, exactly what she used to be. That's what scares me, she said quietly. You don't understand what that costs. Naomi straightened her shoulders. Maybe it costs less than silence. Callie didn't answer, because deep down she knew the girl might be right. At sunset, the town hall's parking lot was full again. News vans, reporters, soldiers in pressed uniforms. The general was still in Pine Haven, giving interviews about leadership, legacy, and sacrifice. Callie stood across the street, half hidden behind her truck, watching him through the reflection in a storefront window. He looked calm, polished, every word perfectly measured. General, some have called you one of the last true field commanders of your generation, a reporter said. Ashford smiled. I wouldn't say that. I was just privileged to lead good people. Callie's jaw tightened. Good people you left to die. Shane appeared beside her, hands in his jacket pockets. You really think he's gonna risk coming after you in public? Men like him don't get their hands dirty, she said. They just send someone else to clean the mess. That night the first message came. Not a call, not a knock. An envelope taped to the garage door. No return address, just her name typed Mercer. Inside was a single printed photo. Her Shane, Naomi, taken 2 days ago outside the diner. Someone had been watching. On the back 2 words, stay quiet. She burned it in the sink before Naomi could see. When Shane came by later, she showed him the ashes. He cursed under his breath. That's intimidation, federal level, they want to scare you off. It's working, she said flatly. No, it's not, you're still here. She gave a dry smile. Maybe I'm too tired to run. He studied her face for a moment. You don't have to do this alone. Yes, she said softly, I do. The next day, Naomi didn't show up at the shop. Callie called the school. They said she'd signed out early. Called Vera, no answer. By noon, the panic had settled in her chest like lead. She drove the roads out of town, scanning every corner, every car. Old training patterns kicked in automatically, routes, choke points, blind spots. And then she saw it, Naomi's backpack, half buried under leaves near the trailhead by the river. She slammed the brakes, jumped out, heart pounding. The bag was intact, phone inside turned off. No blood, no struggle, just absence. And that was worse. She called Shane, she's gone. Gone how? Her phone's here, she's not. Police? Not yet, not until I know who I'm calling. By the time she got back to the shop, there was another car in the lot, black, government plates, engine still warm. A man in a dark suit waited by the hood, hands clasped calmly. Captain Mercer, he said when she stepped out. Agent Price, Department of Defense Oversight. She froze. You're late. Ashford already sent his threats. The man's expression didn't change. General Ashford is under internal review. You may have information relevant to that inquiry. Then you already know what happened. He studied her. What we know and what we can prove are different things. Callie crossed her arms. Why now? Because someone filed a civilian inquiry using details that match a classified operation, he said. Your daughter, Naomi Mercer. Her throat went dry. Where is she? She's fine, Price said quickly. She's with local law enforcement. We just needed to speak with you before this becomes something louder. Louder. Public, political, uncontrollable. He stepped closer. Captain, I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing. Stay silent. Let the process work. She laughed once, hollow, humorless. That's what Ashford said 12 years ago. He sighed. You're not the only one who lost people out there. No, she said, just the only one still paying for it. The agent handed her a card. Think about your family before you decide to go public. She didn't take it. I already did. When he left, Shane stepped out from the shadows behind the garage. You heard that. Every word. So Naomi filed the inquiry. Callie nodded slowly. Yeah, and now everyone's awake. Shane glanced toward the road. You gonna keep trusting the law? I don't trust anyone, she said, but I'm done running from the truth. That evening, Naomi returned. She'd been with Vera and the sheriff's deputies, shaken but unharmed. When she saw her mother waiting on the porch, guilt flooded her face. Mom, I'm sorry. Stop, Callie said gently, pulling her into a hug. Just stop. Naomi clung to her, crying quietly. I just wanted to help. I thought if I got their attention, they'd listen. They listened, Callie whispered. Now they're watching. I didn't mean to make things worse. Callie brushed the hair from her daughter's face. You didn't. You reminded me why I stopped being afraid. Naomi blinked up at her. You're going to tell them, aren't you? Yes, Callie said, all of it. That night, she opened the steel box again. The old patch, the map, Aaron Briggs' dog tag. And beneath them, a small flash drive. She kept it for 12 years, the unedited footage from her helmet cam. The proof she'd hidden even from herself. Her hands trembled as she plugged it in. Static, then movement. Shouts, gunfire. Civilians huddled in the dark as mortar fire tore through walls. Her voice over comms. We have civilians requesting extraction. Command, do you copy? Then Ashford's voice, cold, detached. Negative, Ghost 1. Abort mission, leave them. The video ended with silence. She stared at the frozen frame, the last second before the explosion that took Aaron Briggs' life. She closed the laptop, exhaling like someone who'd finally decided to bleed. The next morning, she drove to the sheriff's office. Agent Price was waiting outside, leaning against his car. You have something for me, he asked. Callie handed him the flash drive, the truth. He turned it in his hand. You understand what this means? I do. It'll destroy him. It already destroyed us, she said. He nodded slowly, almost respectfully. We'll handle the rest. She looked at him. No, you'll handle the paperwork. I'll handle the story. That evening, Naomi posted the video anonymously through a journalist contact. By midnight, it had spread, a soldier's voice refusing to abandon civilians. The internet called her the ghost who spoke. And in Washington, the headlines began to shift. Leaked combat footage challenges Pentagon narrative. General under scrutiny amid new Afghan war allegations. The world was listening now. And Pinehaven wasn't quiet anymore. Callie watched the sunrise from the same porch where she'd once sworn she'd never talk again. The air felt lighter, not clean but real. Naomi came outside, wrapped in a blanket, eyes tired but peaceful. It's out, isn't it? Yeah. What happens now? Callie smiled faintly. Whatever comes, but this time I'll face it standing up. Naomi looked at her mother for a long moment. You think people will forgive you? Maybe, Callie said softly, but I'm not doing it for that. Then for what? For the ones who never got the chance to. They watched the sun rise higher over the ridges. And for the first time in 12 years, Callie didn't feel like a ghost. Sometimes courage isn't a roar. Sometimes it's a whisper, the sound of one voice refusing to stay buried. And in that whisper, the world finally heard the truth. The news broke like thunder, and the silence that followed was worse. By morning, Pinehaven didn't feel like Pinehaven anymore. Reporters lined the main road. Satellite vans hummed outside the diner. Strangers with cameras whispered her name. Captain Callie Mercer. The ghost who spoke. Every headline twisted the story just a little more, the way stories always do when truth hits the open air. Some called her a hero. Some called her a traitor. Most didn't know what to call her at all. Inside the shop, she tried to pretend it was just another morning. But the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, veterans, conspiracy theorists, families of soldiers she'd never met. By noon, she stopped answering. Shane came in through the back door, holding a newspaper under his arm. "You've officially gone viral," he said. "Lucky me." He dropped the paper on the counter. Front page, Ghost Recon leak sparks Pentagon inquiry. Beneath it, a grainy image of her in uniform, pulled from 12-year-old archives. "They found your service photo," he said. "Looks like the past just caught up on film." Callie stared at the paper for a long moment. "They always do." Shane folded his arms. "Price called. They're forming a hearing committee in D.C. You'll probably get subpoenaed." "Good," she said. "It's time they heard from someone who was actually there." "Bad," he countered. "Ashford's not the type to go down quietly." "He's had 12 years to rehearse his lies," she said. "I've had 12 years to remember mine." That evening, Naomi came home to find her mother sitting by the window again, staring at the pine-covered horizon. She hesitated in the doorway. "They showed your clip on national news." Callie didn't turn. "How'd I sound?" "Real," Naomi said softly. "Too real." "That's not always good." Naomi walked closer. "People believe you. They're sharing your video everywhere." "Belief's easy when it costs nothing," Callie said. "Let's see how long it lasts." Naomi frowned. "Why are you doing that?" "Doing what?" "Dismissing it. The truth's out there. You did the right thing." Callie looked at her daughter, her face bright with that same impossible idealism Sarah used to have. "The right thing doesn't protect you. It just tells you who your enemies really are." 3 days later, the threats started. Emails first, anonymous, angry. "You betrayed your country." "Lies get soldiers killed." "You should have stayed quiet, Ghost." Then came the letters, hand-delivered, unsigned. Then someone slashed the shop's tires overnight. When Shane arrived the next morning, she was already cleaning up the mess. He crouched beside her, picking up the shards of rubber. "You reported." "No point. I know who sent the message." "Who?" "Anyone afraid of the truth." He looked at her. "You sure you can handle this?" She met his eyes, calm but tired. "Shane, I've been shot at by people who didn't even know my name. I can handle a few cowards with sharp objects." By the end of the week, she got the call. A calm female voice on the line. "Captain Mercer, this is Chairwoman Alvarez with the Defense Oversight Committee. We'd like you to testify before Congress next month." Callie took a breath. "Will General Ashford be there?" "He's been summoned as well." "Then I'll be there." "Captain," the voice softened, "I know this isn't easy." "It's not supposed to be," she said and hung up. In the evenings, Pinehaven's quiet returned, but not the peace. Callie found herself walking the edge of town, where the road met the trees. The sound of crickets filled the air, mixed with the faint hum of a town pretending nothing was wrong. She stopped by the old Veterans Memorial, names carved in stone, most she didn't know, a few she'd never forget. Aaron Briggs. Ghost too. His name wasn't there, none of theirs were. She ran a gloved finger over the blank granite. "They still don't see you," she whispered, "but they will." Behind her, Shane's voice was soft. "You sure this is worth it?" Callie turned. "You ever notice the people who ask that question are always the ones still alive?" He gave a weary smile. "Fair point." She glanced back at the monument. "It's not about revenge, it's about record. You erase people once, you erase them forever. And you're done being erased." I was done the moment Naomi looked at me and asked why I was afraid. Washington smelled different. Jet fuel, concrete, rain on metal. Callie hadn't been back in over a decade, but the city hadn't changed, just the faces on the posters. Agent Price met her at the airport. No uniform this time, just a worn suit and dark eyes that carried too much knowledge. "Captain," he said quietly, "appreciate you coming." "Not like I had much choice." He smiled faintly. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. She studied him. For what it's worth, that's what they all said before they buried us. The hearing chamber was cold. Cameras lined the back wall, lenses waiting like silent predators. Rows of senators faced her across the table. Ashford sat at the far end, perfectly still, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. When they called her name, the flashbulbs went off. She raised her right hand, swore the oath, sat down. Captain Mercer, the chairwoman began, you served under General Ashford during Operation Nightshade. I did. You were ordered to retreat. Yes. You refused. Callie's voice didn't waver, because civilians would have died. A murmur rippled through the room. The chairwoman leaned forward. What happened then? We were cut off, Callie said. Air support denied, comms jammed. When we requested extraction, command went silent. And you have proof of that silence. She nodded. It's in the footage, the general's voice. The chairwoman turned to Ashford. General, is that your voice on the recording? Ashford's jaw flexed. The recording is incomplete, taken out of context. Context, Callie said softly. The context was dying civilians. There's no right way to abandon them. Ashford finally looked at her. For the first time since Cunnar, his mask cracked. You don't understand what command means, Captain. It means living with impossible choices. She met his stare, and it means owning them. The room went silent. Outside, the world kept watching. News anchors dissected every word. Veterans called in to defend or condemn her. Politicians twisted her testimony into weapons. But through it all, the truth held steady, recorded, archived, undeniable. After the hearing, she stepped outside into the rain. Naomi was waiting by the car, umbrella in hand. You did it, her daughter whispered. No, Callie said softly. I just stopped lying. They stayed in D.C. for a few days while the storm built. The headlines shifted again. General Ashford faces perjury probe. Ghost Recon captain's testimony shakes military command. At night, Callie couldn't sleep, not because she was afraid, but because silence finally felt earned. Shane called once from Pinehaven. Town's proud of you. Even the diner named a sandwich after you. She laughed quietly. Let me guess the ghost special. Grilled cheese and stubbornness, he said. You coming home soon? Yeah, she said, after this part's over. He hesitated. You know it never really ends right. I know, she said, but it changes. When they finally flew back, the mountain air hit different. Crisper, cleaner. Not peace, but something close enough to borrow. The shop was as she'd left it, tools still hanging, engine parts waiting patiently. Shane had kept it running. Naomi had cleaned the office. Life had kept going, like it always does. That night they all sat on the porch. No words, just the sound of wind moving through pine needles and the faint hum of crickets. Naomi leaned against her shoulder. You think they'll believe everything now? Doesn't matter, Callie said. The truth's not a thing people believe, it's a thing they face. Naomi smiled faintly. That sounds like something Grandpa would have said. Yeah, Callie said softly. He'd have liked this view. They sat there until the stars came out, 3 small lights on a quiet mountain, holding the line in their own way. But far away, in some polished room filled with noise and paper, Douglas Ashford was still fighting. Denying bargaining. And somewhere in those sterile halls, a clerk slid a file across a desk. Stamped in black, recommended for court-martial review. The story wasn't over. But for the first time, Callie didn't feel like a supporting character in someone else's report. She was the record now. The living proof that silence could be broken, even after a lifetime. That night before sleep, she stood by the window one last time. Outside, the moon hung low over the ridge. Her reflection stared back at her, older, scarred but steady. She whispered into the glass, "For them, always for them." And the mountain wind carried it somewhere far, where ghosts finally rest. Sometimes truth doesn't destroy you. It just strips away everything that wasn't real. And what's left is who you were always meant to be. It didn't take long for the knives to come out. By the time the hearings ended, the headlines had already changed tone. Not "Hero Speaks Out" anymore, but questions arise about ghost recon footage authenticity. The news cycle had turned, slow and deliberate, like a gun being reloaded. Shane read the paper out loud in the shop one morning, voice edged with disgust. Anonymous sources claim Captain Mercer fabricated communication logs to frame superior officers. He threw it down. "They're coming for you." Callie wiped grease from her hands, calm but pale. "They were always going to." Naomi looked up from her laptop, jaw set. "They're lying. Everyone can see it." "No," Callie said softly. "Most people see what they're told too." Shane paced. "This is Ashford's team. He's pulling strings. He's got friends still inside the Pentagon." "Then we cut the strings," Naomi said. "Expose everything." Callie looked at her, proud, terrified, and angry all at once. "The deeper you dig, the more dangerous it gets." Naomi didn't flinch. "Then we dig careful." That afternoon, a black SUV parked outside the shop again. Agent Price stepped out, the same neutral expression as before. But this time, his eyes carried something else, urgency. "Captain Mercer," he said, glancing around. "We need to talk." "Inside," she said, locking the door behind them. He set a folder on the counter. The backlash was predictable. General Ashford has political protection, but it's crumbling. "Doesn't look like it," she said. "Public pressure's real," Price replied. "But power moves slow, and desperate men make dangerous choices." She studied him. "Meaning?" "Meaning," he said quietly, "you need to watch your back." "Already do." He hesitated. "They've leaked partial transcripts of your testimony, edited, out of context. If they convince the media you acted out of revenge, you'll lose public support before the courts ever meet." Naomi crossed her arms. "So we fight back." Price looked between them. Mother and daughter mirror images of defiance. "That's what they're afraid of." "Good," Callie said. "They should be." That night, the wind off the mountains carried the faint buzz of television voices. Every diner, every bar, every living room, her face was on the screens again. Some praised her. Some cursed her. And some, the dangerous ones, began asking who she thought she was to challenge a general. In the darkness of the living room, Callie watched a reporter say her name with disdain. She claims to represent moral integrity, but sources suggest unresolved trauma may have clouded her judgment. Naomi muted the TV. "That's disgusting." Callie leaned back, eyes distant. "It's strategy. They can't disprove the truth, so they discredit the teller." "Then what now?" Callie exhaled slowly. "Now we let them talk and we keep working." A week later, she was summoned again, this time to a closed-door meeting with the Office of Military Justice. Shane drove her to the airfield himself. "Feels like déjà vu," he muttered. "You walk into the system hopping, it'll listen." She gave a dry smile, and walk out realizing it never does. At the Pentagon Annex, the atmosphere was colder, less polite, more surgical. 3 officials sat behind a table. The middle one spoke. "Captain Mercer, your footage has been verified as authentic. However, chain of command review suggests your refusal to obey orders may still constitute a violation of protocol." She stared at them. "You're telling me saving civilians was the crime?" "We're saying," the official said carefully, "that duty sometimes means sacrifice." She leaned forward. "Then you better start writing that on their tombstones." Silence filled the room. No one moved. Then quietly, one of the younger officers whispered, For what it's worth, ma'am, my father served. He'd have done what you did. Callie stood. Then maybe there's hope for this place yet. Back in Pine Haven, the cost began to show. Old customers stopped coming by. The diner crowd grew quieter when she walked in. Veterans she'd once called brothers avoided her eyes. Naomi saw it all, the slow, polite isolation of a small town caught between loyalty and truth. "They're scared," Callie said simply one night, drying dishes in the kitchen. "Of you. Of change, of what it means if I'm right." Naomi shook her head. "You are right." "Yeah," Callie said softly. "That's the part that scares them most." That weekend, Doc Fisher came by the shop. He didn't say much at first, just stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, watching her work. Finally he said, "Heard they're trying to paint you unstable." "They might be half right," she said dryly. Doc smiled faintly. "I've seen worse cases of sanity." Callie leaned against the hood of the car. "You think I should have stayed quiet?" "No," he said simply, "but I think you should start letting yourself heal." Hard to do when everyone wants to reopen the wound. Doc nodded. "Then maybe healing, not about closing it. Maybe it's about making peace with the scar." She didn't answer, but the words lingered. Late that night, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She almost ignored it until the voice spoke. "Captain Mercer," said the calm baritone. "I assume you recognize me." Her blood went cold. "Ashford." "I wanted to offer you a deal," he said. "Withdraw your public statements. Clarify that the footage was misinterpreted. Do that, and I'll ensure your daughter's future is compromised." "Threatening a child general," she said, voice low. "That's a new low." "You misunderstand me," he said smoothly. "I'm offering mercy." "You don't have any to offer." A pause, then softly, "You really think they'll remember you kindly? You'll be yesterday's outrage in a week. Me, I'll still be the man who built empires." "Empires fall," she said. "Sometimes all it takes is one crack." She hung up. Her hands shook, but her eyes didn't. The next day she went to see the sheriff. Antonio Silva met her at the door. "You look like hell," he said. "Guess that makes two of us." She handed him her phone. "Trace it. Call came from D.C." He nodded grimly. "You're sure you want to keep pushing this?" "Yeah," she said, "because now it's not just about me." By mid-afternoon, the sheriff called back. "You were right." The call was rerouted through a military comm relay. But get this, the signal was scrubbed before I even got there. Someone inside knew I was tracing it. "So he's covering tracks again." "Which means," Silva said quietly, "he's scared." Callie hung up and looked toward the mountains. The horizon glowed orange under a fading sun. She whispered, "Good, he should be." That evening, Naomi was at her desk, typing furiously. "What are you writing?" Callie asked. "An op-ed," Naomi said, "for Ms. Chu's blog, about what it means to stand up when everyone tells you to sit down." Callie smiled faintly. "Sounds familiar." "She says stories like yours remind people the uniform doesn't make the soldier, choices do." Callie's voice softened. "You get that from me." "I got that from watching you," Naomi said, "even when you were scared." Callie looked at her daughter, pride and guilt fighting in her chest. "Just remember, courage doesn't mean you don't shake. It means you keep standing while you do." A week later, Ashford's name hit the news again, but this time it wasn't spin. Military court opens full investigation into General Ashford's conduct. The report was relentless. Financial discrepancies, buried missions, political favors. Shane read it aloud at the shop, grinning for the first time in days. "They're turning on him. You broke the dam." Callie just nodded. "Took long enough." But she didn't smile, not fully. Because she knew, in politics, a drowning man always tries to pull someone down with him. That night her father's words echoed again, the ones from the nursing home, months ago. You carry it different than I did. That's not the same as healing. For the first time, she understood. Maybe healing wasn't silence. Maybe it was sound, the sound of the truth, finally unburied. At dawn, she walked down to the river, where the morning mist hung low and the world felt clean again. In her hand was Aaron Briggs' dog tag. She held it for a long moment, then threw it into the current. "Rest easy, Ghost 2," she whispered. "We made it." The tag disappeared beneath the water, carried downstream, into something larger, freer. She turned back toward town, toward the sound of waking engines and distant chatter. Life was waiting again. Sometimes survival isn't living. It's waiting for the right moment to tell the truth, no matter what it costs. And when that moment finally comes, the silence breaks like dawn over old battlefields. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell over Pinehaven like a secret, soft, unannounced, and merciful. It blanketed the mountains, the rooftops, the quiet scars of a town that had carried more history than it asked for. And for once, the silence didn't feel heavy. The garage smelled of coffee and metal again. Naomi was humming under her breath while sorting receipts at the counter. Shane worked on a Jeep, the radio murmuring a country ballad that almost passed for peace. Callie stood at the workbench, hands steady, her movements calm in a way they hadn't been for years. Outside, the sunlight caught on the snow, scattering light across the concrete floor. 12 years ago, she'd have thought peace was weakness. Now she understood peace was simply the absence of running. The door swung open, and the cold came with it. A uniformed mail carrier stepped inside, holding a thick envelope. "Captain Mercer." "That's me." Certified letter, D.C. return address. She signed, tore it open. Inside, official stationery, government seal. Her eyes scanned the words, slow and deliberate. United States Military Court, findings of inquiry. General Douglas Ashford, guilty of falsifying official reports, dereliction of duty and obstruction of justice. Sentence, dismissal with dishonor, revocation of pension, public censure. At the bottom, one line added by hand. "Your testimony was decisive. Thank you for your service." For a long time, she just stood there. No smile, no tears, just the quiet gravity of something ending. Shane looked up from the Jeep. "It's over." Callie folded the letter carefully. "It's done." He nodded, a faint smile ghosting across his face. "Then maybe you can rest." She looked toward the open bay doors, where the wind carried the faint sound of children laughing in the distance. "Maybe," she said, "but not yet." That evening, Naomi found her mother sitting on the porch, wrapped in an old blanket, a mug of coffee steaming in her hands. The sky above them was painted in fading orange, the kind of sunset that made even silence feel full. "You got him," Naomi said quietly. "No," Callie replied, "the truth did." Naomi sat beside her. "Still feels good, doesn't it?" "It feels final," Callie said, "like a chapter that's been waiting too long to close." They sat there for a while, watching the sun sink behind the ridge. Somewhere the church bell rang 7 times, slow, gentle. Naomi spoke again, her voice soft. "I read something today said that when soldiers tell the truth, it's not just for the living, it's for the dead too." Callie nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's how we keep them from dying twice." Naomi leaned against her shoulder. "You think they'd be proud of you?" Callie smiled faintly. "I think they'd be glad someone finally finished the story." Days turned into weeks, and the world moved on. The headlines shifted. As they always do, new scandals, new names. But here in Pinehaven, the quiet held. Sometimes strangers would stop by the shop, veterans, widows, young recruits, just to shake her hand. Not to ask questions, not to take photos, just to say thank you. One afternoon, a young soldier barely out of boot camp stood in the doorway, uniform still crisp. "Ma'am," he said nervously, "my co told me to look you up, said you're what integrity looks like." Callie chuckled softly. "Tell your co integrity's overrated. Do your job right even when no one's watching." "Yes, ma'am." He saluted. She didn't return it, just gave a small nod. "Go home, kid. The world's still out there." At the nursing home, her father's room smelled of pine cleaner and warm blankets. He was dozing when she came in, the folded letter in her hand. She sat beside him, took his frail hand in hers and whispered, "It's over, Dad." His eyes fluttered open slowly. "Over." Yeah, they listened, finally. A smile crept across his face. "Told you the truth always outlasts the noise." She squeezed his hand. "Took a while." "Good things do," he murmured, drifting back into sleep. Callie stayed for a long time, listening to his breathing, the simple rhythm of life continuing. That night, a knock came at her door. When she opened it, Agent Price stood there, no suit this time, just a windbreaker and tired eyes. "Didn't expect to see you again," she said. "I was in the area," he replied, handing her a small brown envelope. "Thought you'd want this." Inside, a metal, bronze star, her name engraved at the bottom. She stared at it for a long moment. "You know I don't care about medals." "I know," he said, "but this one's not for valor, it's for truth." He turned to leave, then paused at the steps. "You changed more than you think, Captain." She looked at the metal catching the faint glow of her porch light. "I didn't change anything," she said. "I just stopped pretending." Price smiled faintly. "That's change enough," he said, and walked off into the night. The next morning, snow covered the whole valley. Everything was white, silent, untouched, like the world had given itself permission to rest. Callie stood outside the shop, coffee steaming in her hand, watching Naomi build a crooked snowman near the road. For the first time in years, she laughed, not the careful kind, but something deep, unguarded, human. Shane stepped out beside her, adjusting his coat. "You're smiling," he said. "Feels weird," she admitted. "Looks good on you." She elbowed him lightly. "Don't get used to it." That evening, she drove out to the overlook above Pinehaven, the same one she hadn't visited since the day she came home from war. The valley stretched below, quiet and endless, dotted with lights that looked like constellations fallen to earth. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the folded patch Ghost Recon. For years it had been her burden. Now it was just a memory. She set it down on the guardrail, let the wind take it. "Mission complete," she whispered. For the first time, the words didn't taste like guilt. When she returned home, Naomi was waiting on the porch steps, camera in hand. "Interview time," she said with a grin. "Oh, no you don't. Just one question." Callie sighed, sitting beside her. "Fine." Naomi adjusted the lens. "When did you stop being afraid?" Callie thought for a long moment before answering. "When I realized fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you still have something worth protecting." Naomi lowered the camera slowly. "What was yours?" Callie smiled, tired, proud, at peace. "You." As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, Callie sat there alone for a moment longer. The mountains stood tall against the night, silent sentinels to everything that had passed. Somewhere far beyond them, ghosts slept easy. She took a deep breath, the kind that reached the soul, and let it go. Her father had once told her that soldiers never really come home. She finally understood. Home wasn't a place. It was a moment, the one where you finally stop running. The world would forget her name eventually. The headlines would fade. But the people who mattered, the ones she saved, the daughter she raised, the men and women who found courage in her silence, they'd remember. And that was enough. As the wind whispered through the pines, the narrator's voice would fade soft, steady, like an echo carried by the mountain air. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't shout or demand or rage. It simply stands and lets the truth do the talking.